there are a lot of issues beginning to erupt between these two actresses. We already know that there's a lot of pointing the finger scenarios happening, and this is mainly coming from Rachel.
You probably weren't expecting Snow White to trend again, but not like this. Just days before its second weekend in theaters, AMC Theaters allegedly leaked a scene from Disney's Snow White remake, and the internet imploded. The clip, which appears to show a subtle romantic exchange between Snow White and another female character, went viral within hours. Viewers flooded social media, shocked and divided, with hashtags like #WokeWhite and #SnowGay climbing the trending lists by the hour. For Rachel Zegler, who was already dealing with brutal backlash from the film's disappointing $72 million opening, this was gasoline on an already raging fire. Insiders say she was blindsided. Sources close to the situation describe her as visibly shaken when news of the leak broke, not just because of the content, but the timing and the way it was being weaponized against her. She had just begun making peace with the film's poor box office showing when the internet began painting her as the face of Disney's woke agenda all over again. The leak reignited culture war debates, this time louder and more chaotic. Conservative outlets jumped on it, claiming Disney had gone too far, while progressive voices defended the inclusion, saying fairy tales should reflect all types of love. But caught in the middle was Rachel, already under scrutiny for her previous remarks about modernizing the character, now being dragged into a fresh controversy she didn't even see coming. According to sources on the production team, the scene in question had been discussed during reshoots but wasn't supposed to be central. Its emergence now, without Disney's coordinated rollout or clarification, left everyone scrambling, especially Rachel, who felt like a target more than ever. As Twitter X erupted, one crew member summed it up perfectly. This wasn't supposed to be the story, but now it's the only story. If Rachel Zegler thought the worst had passed after Snow White's lukewarm debut, the AMC leak pulled her right back into the storm, only this time, it was louder, more personal, and far more toxic. Within 24 hours of the alleged scene going viral, her name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Right-wing pundits began dissecting every past interview clip, accusing her of pushing an agenda, while hardcore Disney loyalists expressed betrayal, claiming their childhood classic had been hijacked for virtue signaling. And Rachel? She broke. Insiders say she was on the verge of tears during scheduled interviews meant to promote the film's upcoming international release. One PR rep allegedly begged Disney execs to pull her from the media circuit temporarily, saying, "She's not in a state to handle this right now." According to reports, Rachel secluded herself in her hotel suite, canceling all press and barely speaking to anyone besides her inner circle. She reportedly told one confidant, "They're making me the villain in a story I didn't write." To the public, though, the silence was deafening. Critics saw her retreat as confirmation of guilt, while fans split between defending her vulnerability and questioning why she kept finding herself in the eye of controversy. What hurt more, sources say, was that Disney hadn't come to her defense, at least not publicly. As millions debated the intent behind the scene, Rachel was left to carry the fallout alone. Meanwhile, screenshots of old tweets and sound bites resurfaced, moments where Rachel spoke about reimagining the classic tale for a modern audience. These comments, already controversial, now took on new life. One particularly viral post quoted her saying, "This isn't your grandmother's Snow White." Paired with the leaked scene, the internet twisted it into a symbol of Hollywood's anti-traditional agenda. Zegler's team was reportedly scrambling behind the scenes, unsure whether to lean into the progressive narrative, deny the authenticity of the scene, or go completely silent. But by then, the damage was done. She wasn't trending because of her performance. She was trending because she had become the face of a cultural divide, one she never asked to represent. As the internet burned with debates, edits, and memes dissecting every frame of the leaked scene, Rachel Zegler found herself fighting a war without an army. The most deafening part of the entire ordeal? Disney's complete silence. No press release, no clarification, no tweet. While their lead actress endured a fresh wave of criticism, much of it vicious, personal, and politically charged, the studio seemed to vanish from the battlefield. Behind closed doors, insiders described the atmosphere as chaotic damage control. One source familiar with internal discussions said Disney execs were split. Half wanted to issue a statement confirming the scene was misinterpreted or unfinished VFX, while others feared doing so would only legitimize the outrage. Meanwhile, marketing teams debated whether to lean into the controversy for buzz or distance themselves completely. But for Rachel, there was no debate. She was taking the heat alone. And it wasn't just internet trolls anymore. Late-night hosts, podcast personalities, and even major news outlets began discussing the downfall of Snow White. And Zegler's name was always front and center. The narrative was no longer about the movie. It was about her politics, her past comments, her persona. To many, she wasn't just playing Snow White. She was the controversy. Even some within the studio reportedly began whispering doubts. One anonymous crew member told a blogger, "This whole thing got out of hand, but Rachel didn't make it easier. She leaned into it early on. Now we're paying for it." Others were more sympathetic, describing her as someone who genuinely believed she was helping redefine a classic for the better, but lacked the institutional support when the tide turned. And it did turn. Public sentiment flipped. Fans who once praised her boldness now questioned her judgment. Articles with headlines like, "Rachel Zegler's activism backfires" began surfacing, and all the while, Gal Gadot, her co-star, remained unscathed, appearing calm, poised, and almost eerily detached during press stops. One viral side-by-side video showed Gal smiling through an interview, while Rachel visibly fought back emotion in another, with the caption, "One of them knows how to play the game." By the end of the week, it was obvious. Disney wasn't going to save her, and Gal Gadot wasn't going to speak for her. Rachel Zegler was the scapegoat, like it or not, and the world was watching to see how she would respond next. Began gaining traction. Something was seriously off between Zegler and her co-star Gal Gadot. What had once been whispered gossip among set insiders was now being dissected by fans and entertainment blogs. The subtle glances, the lack of public support, the noticeably separate interviews during press runs. It didn't take long for the internet to do what it does best: connect the dots and blow it up. Clips started resurfacing, one where Rachel praises the production's feminist vision, and another where Gal, in a separate interview, cryptically states, "I think some stories work best when they stay timeless." To fans, it felt like a cold rebuke. Soon, a narrative emerged. Gal Gadot was quietly distancing herself from the film, and maybe even Rachel. And then came the alleged leak from inside the studio. A now viral anonymous tip published by a gossip site claimed that Gal had voiced concerns about Rachel's attitude on set, and even warned Disney about the backlash the film could face if it leaned too far into rewriting the original story. The implication? Gal had tried to warn them, and Zegler didn't listen. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. The public ate it up. Suddenly, Rachel's emotional outbursts and progressive comments were being contrasted with Gal's polished professionalism. Twitter threads emerged painting Rachel as immature and overzealous, while Gal was framed as the seasoned vet who kept her head down. Memes labeled them the overachiever and the escape artist. It was brutal. Once the AMC scene leaked, it wasn't just the new controversy that had people talking. It was everything Rachel Zegler had ever said about Snow White. Every interview, every tweet, every soundbite. Suddenly, they were all being dragged back into the spotlight, re-examined with fresh outrage. And this time, the internet wasn't in a forgiving mood. Clips that once seemed harmless, like Rachel confidently saying, "This isn't your grandmother's Snow White," now carried a much sharper edge. Critics labeled it arrogance. Detractors turned it into a battle cry. "We didn't ask for a new Snow White. We liked the old one just fine." And as those quotes ricocheted across social media, they created a narrative that Rachel wasn't just acting in the remake, she was trying to rewrite it. Worse, snippets where she joked about needing to be paid for every hour in costume began to circulate. Satirical TikToks showed side-by-side comparisons of Zegler's comments with clips from the original film, highlighting just how far Disney had strayed. People weren't just annoyed anymore, they felt insulted, as if a beloved piece of their childhood had been mocked by someone who didn't appreciate its legacy. And in an age where outrage travels faster than facts, Rachel's intent didn't matter. The perception had already formed. She was now labeled by some as the face of Hollywood arrogance, a young star handed the keys to a billion-dollar franchise who, in their eyes, spent more time lecturing audiences than enchanting them. But what really turned the tide wasn't just what Rachel said. It was how quiet Disney stayed while she took the hits. No statement, no defense, no clarification of what the movie was really about. And Gal Gadot, still silent, as if the whole mess had nothing to do with her. It left Rachel completely exposed. Every misstep was magnified. Every clip taken out of context became a headline. And the more she tried to hide, the louder the criticism grew. Some fans stayed loyal, defending her intentions and calling the backlash misogynistic and unfair. But for the majority, Rachel's persona had already been cemented. Not as a princess, but as a problem. The film's marketing campaign, already shaky, now became almost irrelevant. Nobody was talking about the visuals or the story anymore. They were talking about Rachel Zegler versus the world. And the pressure wasn't just public, it was internal too. Sources close to the studio claimed that some Disney execs began quietly shifting focus away from Zegler and press materials, leaning harder on visuals, Gal's villain role, or the film's epic CGI. Anything but Rachel. She had gone from poster child to PR liability in a matter of days, and it all stemmed from a few old quotes, resurrected at the worst possible time. While Rachel Zegler faced the internet's wrath, Disney was crumbling behind the curtain. What had started as a bold, modern reimagining of a beloved fairy tale was now shaping up to be a textbook case of how not to handle a blockbuster remake. From the moment the AMC scene leaked, it was clear the studio had no plan, just panic. Inside sources described meetings that felt more like triage units than strategy sessions. Marketing departments didn't know whether to lean into the controversy for clickbait appeal or pull the film entirely from the spotlight. Executives were reportedly split down the middle. Some blamed Rachel for being too outspoken, others blamed Gal Gadot for being too disengaged, and a few quietly admitted the real issue was Disney's failure to create a cohesive vision from the start. The project had already been plagued by reshoots, ballooning budgets, and creative disagreements. Now it was hemorrhaging credibility. Test screenings were dismal. Families weren't showing up. Hardcore Disney fans felt alienated. Even casual moviegoers were more curious about the feud than the actual plot. One viral meme summed it up. More people are watching the drama than the movie. Adding fuel to the fire was the rumored lawsuit, a $100 million defamation claim allegedly brewing behind the scenes. Whether Rachel was actually preparing to sue Gal Gadot, Disney, or both wasn't confirmed, but just the idea of legal fallout between co-stars sent media outlets into a frenzy. Tabloids ran headlines like Princess vs. Queen, Disney's Royal Meltdown, and YouTubers dissected every facial expression from old interviews like forensic analysts. Meanwhile, Gal Gadot was playing it safe. Too safe. She showed up to press events looking polished, smiling, but offering generic quotes about how every film comes with challenges. Her refusal to publicly address the controversy only fueled speculation that she was either guilty of throwing Rachel under the bus or strategically avoiding the mess until it blew over. Either way, it didn't look good. The internal mood at Disney grew tense. Investors started asking questions. Whispers of executive reshuffles began circulating. One source claimed that a top studio head was heard saying, "We gambled on Gen Z values and forgot our core audience." Harsh? Maybe. But by now, the damage was undeniable. Every attempt to steer the narrative, from new trailers to TV spots, fell flat. People weren't paying attention to the film anymore. They were watching the fallout. Disney had banked on nostalgia, modern messaging, and star power, but instead, they got a case study in how a brand can misfire on every level when there's no unified direction, just PR spin, clashing egos, and viral controversy. And at the center of it all was Rachel Zegler, emotionally drained, publicly humiliated, and now caught in a storm that was supposed to be her fairy tale debut. By the time the dust settled, it was clear Snow White wasn't just a box office disappointment. It was a full-scale collapse, and Rachel Zegler was its public face. The AMC leak might have been the spark, but the fire had been smoldering for months. Undercooked messaging, fan disconnect, feuding leads, and a studio that seemed more concerned with checking boxes than telling a compelling story. And for Rachel, the toll was brutal. Those closest to her described a woman at her breaking point. She'd gone from rising star to controversial headline in under a year. Her attempt to modernize a legacy role, while well-intentioned, backfired in the harshest way. What began as a passion project ended with her sobbing behind closed doors, overwhelmed by online hate, studio silence, and rumors of betrayal by a co-star she once admired. Even her few cryptic social media posts about resilience and magic turning to curses were picked apart, mocked, and weaponized. She couldn't win. Speak up, and she's too political. Stay silent, and she's hiding. No matter what, the narrative had moved past her. She was now a symbol, not a person. Gal Gadot, meanwhile, escaped relatively unscathed. While some critics viewed her silence as calculated, many fans praised her professionalism and poise. Whether or not she contributed to the storm behind the scenes, she remained untouched by the worst of the backlash. A seasoned vet who, at worst, had simply chosen her battles carefully. Disney, however, didn't walk away clean. The studio is now reportedly rethinking its entire approach to legacy remakes. More internal oversight, stricter control over tone, casting, and messaging, less risk-taking. And above all, don't alienate the audience you built your empire on. If Snow White taught them anything, it's that nostalgia is powerful, but mishandling it is radioactive. The film will likely limp to streaming, where curiosity clicks might give it a second wind, but the damage is done. What was supposed to be Rachel Zegler's defining moment has instead become a cautionary tale in Hollywood history.